Guys, this is the Spyderco PM2, and the first review I ever saw of this knife was 6 years ago. I went and checked by my buddy Nick Shabazz. So why did it take me 6 years to finally get this knife? There's a lot of reasons, but it's an amazing knife, and we're going to take a look at it from above. So yes, I know you probably are tired of seeing my Spyderco PM2 in videos, but I have to do this. This is the final review of this. You can see I have used the crap out of this knife over the last few weeks. So why did I wait so long to get one? At this point, to be honest, I really don't know, but this is an amazing knife. Now mine is in CPM S90V, and I have to say, I think this is probably the best S90V blade I've ever had. The heat treat on this is leaps and bounds above anything I've had other than a custom heat treat on a knife that came from Elliot Williamson at Fair and Forged Knife Works that he did small batch, no more than 3 knives at a time. Spyderco has really nailed their heat treat on this. We'll talk about that. First things first, let's talk about some specs. So, as I said, this is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 PM2. This is done in CPM S90V. This was a sprint run, so you're going to hear some specs. The scales on this are not the original color. So this is 8.25 inches overall. Blade length is 3.44 inches. Cutting edge of 3 inches exactly with blade stock thickness of 0.14 inches. It is in S90V, as I said, clip point blade. I think it's more of a drop point, but go ahead. That's what they've got listed. Blade grind is a full flat grind, and it is a plain edge. The handle length is 4.81 inches, and the handle thickness is 0.46. Now, overall weight on this, it is amazingly low, 3.75 ounces. Now, I have to point out that this is absolutely not the way this knife looked when it came to me. I did not like the color of the scales, so I dyed the scales, and I have added a CME. So if you guys know anything about me, if I modify a knife in any way, it's mine. It's staying here. And I have to say I've fallen in love with this knife over the last few weeks. So let's talk about this knife, but first let's do a couple size comparisons. Most of you are already going to know the size, but let's go ahead and crack out a couple things. First knife you're going to see is one of my all-time favorite knife models, the Spyderco Endura. This one's in ZDP 189, so you can see very similar in size overall. Your next knife is going to be the Benchmade 940, a knife that almost every one of you is going to know as a good size reference. You can see good bit bigger than the Benchmade 940. And your final knife, as always, is Chris Reeves Sebenza Large 21, very similar in size, overall length, and things like that. So, Large Sebenza, just ever so slightly longer blade to handle, better blade to handle ratio. So let's get this out of the way and talk about this knife. So first and foremost, let's get past the elephant in the room is like, why did it take me 6 years, as you're going to see the title of the video? Why did it take me 6 years to finally get around to owning this knife? And a lot of it has to do with, I'm just not a fan of the pricing structure at Spyderco, and Spyderco historically has some issues with their knives. This knife does have some issues, and we'll talk about that after. But I have to say, this is an incredible knife. It is the first compression lock knife I have owned, and I did install a CME on it. A lot of people are giving the CME some hate. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but overall, this knife has been incredible. The heat treat on this S90V blade is the best I've ever had on S90V. Like I said, short of custom heat treat, small batch, 3 knives at a time, which you're always going to get the best result of when a custom knife maker is doing it. Blade on this, beautiful distal taper. It comes down to a nice fine point, full flat grind that is not super thin behind the edge, but as you can see, I gave it a fairly thin laid back angle on this. As a matter of fact, I pretty much followed Spyderco's original angle, and it is screaming sharp at 800 grit. Just nightmare inducing sharp. This has cut so well through everything I've thrown at it. I am typically a fan of a much longer straight on a blade before it starts to transition down, but the radius on this is low enough. It feels straight longer than it actually is. Your belly starts about here and starts to taper off, but you can still maintain and stay engaged with your cut on this really, really well. The edge has held up extraordinarily well. Like I said, the best heat treat on S90V I've ever gotten. in hand, this is probably one of the most comfortable knives I own. I talked about it in a video where I talked about the ugly ducklings of the knife world, which are the Spyderco knives. Sal Glesser absolutely banked on ergos being more important than looks. And I have to say he was right. This knife is probably one of the most comfortable knives to use and cut with. This big camel hump where your Spidey hole is, it just gives you a natural spot to put your thumb. You can bear down on that with no fear of this knife failing because the compression lock, one of the strongest locks in the market. So you can push down on it really hard, get a very good solid grip on that, and just tear through whatever you want. You've got this big finger choil here where you can get up on it to do even more, you know, heavy duty cutting and push down through things, which it exceeds at. You've got this big swell in here on these nicely done G10 handles. I have to say they're pretty plain, they're pretty flat, but they are super comfortable and they are well done. The contouring here on these gives them just about the right feel in hand. You've got this nice widening here. Then you got a spot for the lower fingers, a spot for your forward finger, and then it fills up here and it just fills that gap in your hand so well that you don't necessarily need a big palm swell on the spine. You do have a huge lanyard hole on this, which I can see on this knife being something you might want if you're doing some heavy cutting and wrapping that around your wrist. I used this, if you're wondering about all my stuff in my hand, I used this to do some work in the yard where I was working on the rose bushes, and I was seeing how it would cut in a situation where I needed to get in and not necessarily have a hold of the object that I was cutting, and it did really, really well. This thing has got one of the smoothest actions on any knife I own. It feels as free as a button lock, and it's on washers. That is one of the smoothest washer actions I've ever had. Construction wise, you've got a point for every conceivable carry of this knife you want, except for scout carry. You've got tip up, tip down, left hand, right hand, and the pocket clip on it, like all Spydercos, is an excellent pocket clip. It's not in a hot spot on this knife. It's kind of an angle where it puts it in a unique position compared to a lot of other knives. So it's at an angle up, and it does not at all feel hot. You don't even really realize it's there. And if it was an issue, you can always just move it to the other side if you wanted. I've had this left hand carry and right hand carry. I love it because with the addition of the CME, this is an ambidextrous lock. A lot like a button lock. So I've carried this left-handed and right-handed. And construction-wise, all of the screws are T8 except for these pocket clip screws, which means that you've got good, robust hardware that you don't really have to worry about stripping. T6 screws are very, very prone to stripping out. And since you don't really have to do much to tighten this down to hold this in place, the screws don't have to be super tight, not much risk that you're going to do it. And the screws have got nice, deep pockets for your Torx bit. And then the DLC that they did on this has held up exceedingly well. Now, I do have to admit that this knife was given to me by a guy that he kind of made a shiny spot on this, trying to remove what he thought was some rust. And I think it was just maybe some residual stuff that was in the DLC. And so when we tried to refinish it, he was like, it didn't work out. So he just gave me the knife. The DLC has held up to the massive amount of cutting that this knife has done very, very well. So I kind of have changed my stance on it. Is it worth the money? Yes. Currently at the price, I'll put a link for this down below. It's on sale, this exact knife in this exact steel with the other colored, teal colored scales. So we can talk about that, but I do have to say, with the good always comes some bad. And with Spyderco knives, there's always some weirdness that we got to talk about when we talk about the negative stuff right after you guys hear from Coffee Brand Coffee. Guys, you guys know I love coffee. I even have my own personalized coffee mug. But did you know that a lot of the coffee companies out there take a lot of the money that you give them that they should be throwing back into the company to make a better product and turn it into activism dollars? Coffee Brand Coffee does not do that. They take no stance politically any direction. They take all the money that they make and try to make a better product. So if you want to support this channel and a company that I absolutely do like the fact that they don't lean either direction politically, check out Coffee Brand Coffee. There's a link down below that will save you 5% at checkout, or you can use the coupon code CrazySharp, all one word, capital C, capital S, CrazySharp, all one word. They also have cold brew coffee, teas, and cocos, freshly ground and roasted to order. So check them out, support them, and support this channel. So let's talk about the negative stuff. First and foremost, I am a big fan of a closer to 1-to-1 handle to blade to handle ratio. And on this knife, you really don't get it. And while I can see people wanting a lanyard on this, I did mention that, you could have stuffed so much more blade in this knife if you had just dropped the point down a little further into the blade, added a little extra blade, and got rid of this horrendously large lanyard hole tube that's in there. Next thing, Spyderco knives historically have got weirdness with blade play and things like that, especially the PM2 models. I've never had a knife that was so hard to get rid of the blade play. I had to flip the screws. I tried side to side. I flipped the washers. I flipped the washers over once and got them back in position. And now I have zero blade play. But the problem is, once I established zero blade play and got the smooth free action I wanted, and I played with all of the body screws at different height. Once I got this thing to where it had zero blade play, I now have got a centering issue. Now, centering issue, to tell you the truth, I couldn't give two craps about it. But it just goes to show that there are issues with the way Spyderco are doing things, which goes back to my point. This knife is kind of overpriced if you pay full price for it. It really is. There are so many knives out there that are going to be better at that price point. But love this knife. Couldn't go wrong with it. Next thing, their plunges are horrible. And I know that a lot of guys like it so you can get right up in and start cutting. But where you would have a sharpening notch that would bring that out, it's not going to affect any more than this did. I have had more issues with this knife than any other Spyderco because of this big finger guard that gives you that forward choil that I said I liked. And so you're gonna establish a frown in there. You can see there's an area where even though I was smacking into my stones, I was like trying to be real careful. There is always an issue with the grind from side to side. This side, it's on the heel, and you're going to see it on the heel over here as well. Much more pronounced, deeper. But the show scale side always has a massive issue with Spyderco knives. You can see how deep that area is where it's misground, and then you can see here at the tip also a remnant of the original grind where it was just misground, and it is still a little asymmetrical at the tip because Spyderco's Golden Colorado knives, the edge grinds on them are horrendously inconsistent, bad from side to side, always on the show scale side, and they're really proud of that robot sharpening system they have that doesn't really do what they're bragging about something that's not that good. And then the final thing, as much as I like the compression lock, I have got really big hands, and a lot of people have crapped on the CME, the video I did about it. But if you've got really big hands, or you happen to be left-handed, or you've got nerve damage in your hand like me, the compression lock is not a real user-friendly lock. I threw this CME on here that Justin makes over at EDC, OCD for EDC. And they are amazing. It absolutely made it a game changer for me. If you're left-handed, I can absolutely manipulate this so much better now than I could before because I have really large hands, above average size hands, and I have a lot of nerve damage in this right arm. So it was a game changer. That's what really brought it to the forefront. I got to shout out Justin again for making something that made this knife so much better. But all in all, do I love this knife, even with all of its little imperfections? Yeah, probably one of the best knives that I have ever owned on the market today. A great, great knife. And even with the little inconsistencies and the fact it's an unattractive knife, it is still amazing at what it does. So big shout out to Sal Glesser for banking on ergos over looks. Big shout out. I mentioned it in a video before. Great, great thinking. And I mean, you just can't go wrong with this knife, especially considering it's not full price right now. So like I said, link down below. Guys, that's it on this one. I will send you out about your day after we do some final thoughts. So yeah, guys, there was a lot of reasons that I did not get around to getting one of these knives, and I still didn't buy this knife. I wouldn't have this knife if it wasn't for one of my paying subscribers, Zorro. So it's a great knife, but I think that because Spyderco typically in the past, before they've revised the way they do their heat treats, between the heat treat issues and construction issues and just pricing structure, I just kind of started to avoid Spyderco in general. But I gotta say, I think they've resolved a lot of the issues with the heat treat. And like I said, the best S90V blade I've ever had in a production knife. So with that being said, guys, it was a long enough video already. You know what to do. Like the videos, don't like the videos. If you don't, tell me why. Support the channel. There's sponsors, Coffee Brand Coffee, Tempered Trail, and also Fair and Forged Knife Works. They're not a sponsor, but they all share the same coupon code Crazy Sharp. All one word. Coffee Brand Coffee, there's a link down below that saves you 5% at checkout. All those save you 5% at checkout. I've got a membership where everyone has access to the Gilded server. On that Gilded server, I do giveaways for the baseline and premium guys, and the premium guys have access to a sharpening tutorial series behind this paywall. And I have an Amazon store down below. Take it, pin it to your browser, use it so you can buy a bunch of stuff without putting on pants and support the channel at the same time because it doesn't cost you anything at checkout. Guys, that's it on this one. I love you all. Keep it clean in the comment section. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. I'll see you in the next video.